Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Little Talks with PopCultX. I am your host, Daniel, and today we are joined by a fantastic comic book writer. Well, let me stop that right there because this is something that I've been curious about, and I'm just want to get your opinion. But first, welcome to the show, Ethan Sachs. Now,
thank you.
I stopped it right there because is it comic book writer or comic book author? It's just something that's been bugging me. I'm kind of new.
I mean,
to the comic book
I
world.
say comic book writer.
Okay.
I've come into this industry through journalism, so I consider myself more of a writer than an author, I guess.
Okay.
Kind of turning out stuff quickly. But I've been called much worse, so I will take anything.
I hear you. Okay, well, welcome to the show, comic book. I'm going to go with author because you are published. You are well known within the universe of the comic book realm. And I mean, you've written like Old Man Quill, you've written Star Wars Bounty Hunter, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. How I found you through Old Man Hawkeye, and many others, Silver Surfer, your new one, Climate Crisis Chronicles. You have, which we'll get to a little bit later on, and another one that we'll also get back to later on. I'm teasing for a future portion of this interview, but I came across your work through Old Man Hawkeye. Now, like I said, I'm kind of relatively new still to the comic book industry, having really picked it up just in the past year and a half or so. I've enjoyed movies, comic book movies, MCU, somewhat on the DC side as well. But I really didn't get into comic books until recently. And my first comic book that I really picked up was the Matt Fraction's Hawkeye run. So with David. Yeah. So after reading through that and not wanting to leave the character Hawkeye behind, I started branching out, looking out for more versions of Hawkeye. Of course, came across Kate Bishop's version, and then eventually led me down the road to Old Man Hawkeye, which was written by you. And this is such a great story. It really is. I mean, I completely enjoy it. Now, that is a prequel. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a prequel to Old Man Logan, which was a series penned by Mark Miller and drawn by Steve McNiven about 10 years before I wrote Old Man Hawkeye. And in that series, spoiler alert, but I feel like most people have had a chance to see it. Hawkeye was blind, was kind of still a badass fighter, and died a horrible death in the course of that book. So the backstory I had been, before I was a comic book writer, I'd been a journalist at the New York Daily News for 20 years. Yes, and one of the things I covered was comic books and pop culture and movies and TV and all. I was on the quote unquote geek beat.
Nice.
And I had gotten to know, over like 20 years, I'd gotten to know Joe Quesada, who former editor-in-chief at Marvel, and at the time where my story begins, he was the chief creative officer at Marvel.
Oh, okay, cool.
So the shortest version of this story is I had done a story for the New York Daily News interviewing this actor, Paul Blake, who had played Greedo in Star Wars, and I had asked him if it bothered. It was just for a May the 4th.
Okay, cool.
News, sort of fake Star Wars holiday. And I interviewed him, and I asked him if he had, if it bothered him at all that he had, that generations had thought that Greedo shot first across this small table and somehow missed. And he had this whole like funny, almost like a stand-up comedy bit about Greedo's eyes, myopic eyes, and all this kind of stuff. He did say it said in the script, Han shoots alien. So I left that interview with the sudden idea that popped in my head of a story of the murder investigation into Greedo, and telling it almost like Rashomon style. And for those who don't know, Rashomon is a Japanese movie based on a novel set in feudal Japan, where a murder is told through 4 different witnesses, including ultimately the ghost. and it's very different accounts. And so you don't really know who's telling the truth. And so I sort of thought it'd be kind of cool to tell the murder investigation
That would be cool.
from this point of view. So I went to a Mets game with my friend Joe, and I was like, hey, I have this idea. It's just first script. I think it's kind of funny, honestly. It could be fun. Do you mind if I send it in? You don't have to do anything with it. You could like print it out and curb your dog with it. It goes, whatever. But it's in my head. Would you mind if I wrote it? Because I work for the Daily News, I would donate anything to charity or whatever it is. I just have this idea in my head. And he's like, fine, whatever. It was totally not enthusiastic about it, but he said, fine, whatever. So I end up taking that. Because I knew, because I covered Star Wars movies, I knew a publicist at Lucasfilm who put me in touch with some of the members of this, of the story group. Just for or a member of the story group, and just for some continuity questions. And I'd never written a comic book script, but I'd read a million of them, covering comics. So I reverse engineered the ones I loved, like the pacing and all this kind of stuff. I ended up writing a script. The person who I won't mention from story group had said, the one thing is it's canon. Han did not shoot first. That's what George wanted. And so running with that, I made the murder inspector Kitster, one of Anakin's childhood friends.
Okay.
It's Mos Eisley. No one would care about a murder, but if the sort of the homicide cop, if you will, was somebody from Greedo's childhood, and up until recently in the comics, Kitster did not really have any canonical place except for Phantom Menace and the deleted scenes in Phantom Menace. So I figured, Greedo would be someone he knew from childhood, and so he would have interest in investigating. Long story short, I sent it in, didn't hear anything for months. So I thought, okay, well, it must have been really terrible, and that's it. But then I came back from Japan, visiting in-laws, plane landed. I turned my phone back on September 7th, 2016. I got the email from Joe that changed my life, and his
nice.
This is a family-friendly interview, so I will not tell you what the subject line, but it was a word dash Greedo was the subject line, blank Greedo.
Gotcha.
And he was like, blank Greedo, you can actually write. And I'm kind of annoyed that 20 years in, this is how I find out. He loved the script. He forwarded to then editor-in-chief Axel Alonso, who loved it. And Axel was like, give me a list of characters you think you can write. I want to find something for you. So that was literally that never happens. And I'm cool. lucky as much as anything. And then about 6 months later, Mark Basso, who was the editor, who was doing a book, Old Man Hawkeye, I had done one 8-page story for Marvel in that 6 months. And he reached out to me and he said, I'm reaching out to a couple of writers just to see what their pitches are. I'm going on vacation in 2 weeks. You can give it to me after I come back, but what your 12-issue miniseries, which I didn't know how fortunate that was for a literally first-time comic book writer. And simultaneously, by the way, shortly after I got that email from Joe, the New York Daily News was offering buyouts. And because I'd been there 20 years, it was 7 months pay.
Oh, wow.
If you're going to do a career change, that was I stretched that 7 months pay into 2 years on my wife's health insurance. I took a couple of side gigs in journalism, but I was able to make that last for 2 years until I could get up and running on a comic book career. So, Mark reached out, offered me the chance to pitch for Old Man Hawkeye. I spent 2 weeks rereading everything I could get my hands on about Hawkeye, and I glommed onto the idea of having the Thunderbolt, in this world where the villains took over, where would the Thunderbolts stand, since they're sort of walk in both worlds? And then if they were the ones that sort of tipped the scales, at least on the Avengers side, that would mean for Hawkeye. And so everything kind of fell into place once I realized I wanted to focus on the Thunderbolts. And I got him the outline before he went on vacation, because I was sort of first.
Right.
And I guess the rest is history on that front.
That's really cool. So you're back to your Star Wars little detective story. Whatever happened with that? I mean, that sounds very interesting to me, like a almost like a Star Wars noir type of run, because that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, it was part noir, but it was also very tongue in cheek.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Lucasfilm ultimately decided they did not want to publish. I think that there might have been some continuity things that they were thinking of in the future, which is, they liked it, but it was just a matter of it didn't fit with other plans they had. So to this day, I don't necessarily know like what specifically, but it literally changed my life in that it changed the direction of my career. So in that, even though it was never published.
That's cool. Let's talk about your career a little bit. So like you said, you spent 20 years at the New York Daily News as a journalist covering music, sports, geek culture, as you said, which I'm assuming is just anything under the pop culture umbrella. So you must be like the number one draft pick when it comes to trivia games at your household, right? So
I don't know about that. As I get older, the memory slips a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't draft myself first. You could do better,
but what led you to wanting to be, or what was your passion for storytelling? What got you into that?
I mean, honestly, like I came to it, I was born in 1973. So I was 4 years old when the first Star Wars came out. And it was like seismic. I mean, I still can close my eyes and remember being in the theater with my father, who had passed away, almost 30 years ago. And it's like he's still alive. And it's like the memory is so vivid. It's really like the first memory that I can actively still remember, that the the Star Destroyer flying overhead, and I'd never seen anything like it, and the music and everything, it's so vivid. So I'd say like that was something that changed my life in that way. I went, to this day I have over here my lone remaining original Star Wars action figure.
Nice.
Hammerhead, because my mom had sold all my other action figures in the garage sale when I got older, and it was important to me. For some reason, nobody wanted to buy the historian. So I've literally had this, like I've done interviews since with George Lucas, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill. I've had this in like my jacket pocket for luck.
That's cool.
So this little guy has been with me for a while. But besides that, also comics. I started with The Flash, but then I really gravitated towards X-Men, actually Micronauts. Somewhere back there is a autographed copy of issue number 1 of the Micronauts, signed by artist Michael Golden. And I learned how to read with comic books. So like I was a geek from my 4 years old, and I never really outgrew it. So even when I went into journalism, originally I was thinking like I'm going to cover politics or like crime or like these hard hitting things, and then because I love this stuff and they didn't really have anyone else covering it, I just ended up covering. My first cover story is when I met Joe Quesada. It was like the young guns, Joe Quesada and Bill Jemas, who saved Marvel from bankruptcy. And this is like 2001. Wow. I remember. And then I did like Just Imagine when Stan Lee was doing the DC heroes, like reimagining the DC heroes. So those were like my first big stories for the Daily News.
Cool.
So it never, I found a way to like have it be a job. Time my mom said, all this money you're spending on comics, it's like a waste. No, I was preparing.
Nope. I was looking ahead, Mom. I saw the future. That's cool. Well, speaking of your mom and your dad, I mean, I went to Star Wars when I was 3 weeks old, I think. I was born in 1977. So my mom's told me we took you with us to the theater to go watch it when Star Wars came out. So
wow. So you're even harder core than I am.
Exactly. Well, I don't know about that. I'll just say I was younger. when I first saw it. um, how much did your upbringing and where you're from influence like your writing style or your writing?
I mean, I always, since I was a child, I always like loved to write, you know, indecipherable stuff now. I would draw my own comics with really terrible art because I was never an artist. I remember I drew in high school one time. I drew Nimrod, the Sentinel from the X-Men, and I could not draw his legs. So I drew a toothbrush as if he was like an electric toothbrush because I spent so much time drawing the top half and I just couldn't draw the legs. So then I made it like an ad for eradicating mutant plaque. I couldn't draw. I just couldn't draw. So I stuck to writing, and then I discovered like the reason I became a journalist was I enjoyed it. I found like a journalism class in high school, and I really loved doing it.
Oh,
and it was
cool.
like, okay, well, this is a job where you can actually write for a living, not realizing like all the other stuff that goes in it, and how the writing is secondary to the reporting and all this kind of stuff that I would learn later in life. But that was sort of my way in so that I could do what I love to do for a living. And I just like never thought comics, which I loved reading, was an actual job. It seemed like that's like you tell me like, okay, being an astronaut is a job. I've interviewed some astronauts in my life, but like I couldn't imagine a scenario where I would become an astronaut. It's like a Keebler elf, like,
Right.
I'm sure someone makes cookies in a tree, but that's not a job in my mind. So that was comic book writers, astronauts, and Keebler elves. Like that was things that I just didn't think of as actual jobs. So my in was journalism, and that's sort of how I channeled it for a long period of time.
That's cool. That's really cool. Now, one of the things that I enjoy in stories is finding like surprises or being surprised by different things, of course. So like when I was reading through Moon Knight recently, I found out, oh wow, he's Jewish. And that totally shocked me because the name of like Mark Spector, I wasn't expecting that. I'm half Jewish. So I kind of related to that. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Has there been any, so you've read a lot of comics. Has there been any surprises like that for you where it's really out of left field and it got you?
Reading comics, I mean, there've been a number. Like certainly, I'm born Jewish, although fairly agnostic. So certainly, like reading the X-Men and Kitty Pryde and that kind of when I was younger, just to have that kind of character that I related to on that front. But I think writing characters, things surprise me that I connect with that maybe going in I didn't know I would connect with. To give you a couple of examples, like writing Old Man Hawkeye, I related to him so much it was disturbing. I'm not that old, but I felt like the time passing him by, and so I have a daughter and he has a daughter, and this just feeling of being unprepared for parenthood, or like not being good enough as a parent maybe, or whatever, like all these neuroses. I really related to him beyond the fantastical story. And I think one of the things I try to do is find the character first, and then you write the story around them. Like what is the character's arc? What is, where are they going to start and where are they going to finish, from that point. And then the story kind of is secondary to that. Like, I try to do both, but I try to find my way into the character. And another example of that is Valance, because I remember the character vaguely from the original Marvel run when I was a kid. And I remember not liking him at all, like thinking of him as a villain, like he's kind of cool with droids. He's just kind of a jerk. I did not like him very much at all as a kid. I just vaguely remember him from that original run. But and then when I came in, he was reintroduced and introduced into canon. And, there was this sort of badass bounty hunter thing to him, but I found that I started to lean in more to this idea that he was rebuilt physically, but he's still trying to put himself back together, like emotionally. and he's
Yeah.
like a work in progress. And I really
Yeah.
related to that. So as I wrote him more, I found like I did not see that aspect of him in the very beginning when I started writing, and then it just sort of came out more and more.
Oh, that's cool. So you're surprised by your own writing there, and
Well,
that's,
surprising by like what I relate to the
yeah.
characters. Like,
Okay,
yeah.
that's really
So
cool.
that kind of stuff, I definitely feel, um, and there's certain characters you write, like you can't believe you relate to them. Like I wrote Electra in a one shot called Squadron Savage, and was like a tie-in to a recent event. And like, um, I just, I love the character, but I just never thought I would relate to that character. So there's
Hmm.
certain times you get surprised by the character as
Yeah,
you're.
that's really cool. That's so.
The one
If
I
you're offering
came on
any
with.
advice out to young aspiring writers,
Hmm.
what would be like your one piece of advice to them?
I have two pieces of advice for the price of one.
Okay.
The first one is just like when you are actually writing, you need to write. And that sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, but I think a lot of people who are aspiring writers, whether they're novelists, comic book writers, they get stuck on not liking what's coming out. And
Okay.
or like it's just like they write it, it's never as good as they sort of see it half formed in their mind, and then they delete or they don't write at all. And I think like the big difference between people who write for a living and people who don't are the people who write for a living put it on paper or put it on the screen, like they just get it out. So you have to get it out of your own head first.
Yeah.
I think it was Stephen King said like there's never been a great first draft. And so like the stumbling block is always getting that first draft and then working with that first draft. And if you don't get that first draft out on the screen or on paper or however you do it, like it's not going to come out. Like it's never going to come out perfect. Like do not, get into that neurotic thing where it's like, oh, it's not good enough. I hate it. Like I'm going to delete.
Yeah.
Um, and I think like that was the great thing about journalism to prepare for like comic book writing is I had to write something on deadline. And even if I didn't love it, it had to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to emotionally divorce myself from it and move on to the next thing. And I feel like it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have issues with it. And so the first piece of advice is like, write.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second piece of advice is like, if you want to break into comics, like you're not going to, like, you can have the greatest idea for Marvel or DC. Like they're not going to accept like a pitch out of nowhere. Like you have to start writing your own ideas, start like whether it's self-published or whether it's published on the web, or, it's great if you can, find like an anthology and submit something. Like you have to build up some track record outside of that,
Right.
first. Like it's not like you can shortcut everything. I know,
kind of like what you did.
I sort of did, but at the same time, it's because I had 20 years of writing nonstop. Joe knew my work. Like he read the articles. He knew. So it wasn't like it wasn't like a fairy tale where someone came down with a magic wand. There was a lot of work that I put in, not directly related, but tangential, but still connected enough that I got that chance. So my point is like, start writing your own stories, find a way to get them published. There's a lot of different ways now that were not available like 20, 30 years ago. There's true. Like, various online tools. There's, you can get your stuff out there, spread the word, social media. People do get into comics that way.
Yeah.
So I think like that, those are my two pieces of advice.
That's very good. Thank you for that. Now you mentioned about self-publishing. Now I know a lot of comic book writers that I follow are currently creating their own creator controlled, I guess you would call it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and you mentioned, I think you said the heavy metal anthology.
I did a one shot that's sort of a 36 page it's a flip book. With the artist Mark Lorenzana, and very proud of it. It was with heavy metal and Magma Comics, Dent and
Okay.
Tipton's imprint. And so that one is out. There are a couple other ones that I'm in talks with one publisher for one thing, and there's like my dream project. Neither one I can talk about, but they would both be creator-owned projects. But the one
Mhm.
shot that did get published is called Intrusion. It's a period horror story, and it's set in Louisiana
Nice.
in the 1700s, and it's basically like an Acadian French family that was sort of kicked out. They had like a diaspora from when the British sort of
Hmm.
won in Nova
Hmm.
Scotia and Canada, and a whole bunch ended up in Louisiana in the swampland. Basically, became the Cajuns. And so anyway, this family moves there, and it just so happens to be a nesting ground for like a local creature. And there's in local sort of urban legends, there's this
Nice.
called the Grunch Road monsters, and so anyway, it's basically one side is told from the human's perspective, one side from the monster's perspective, and they're sort of heading towards a collision.
That's
And
cool.
it's done in a flip book. I'm biased, but I'm pretty proud of the way it came out, largely because Marco, the artist, is amazing. So
That's really cool. That sounds amazing. I mean, I'm gonna go find that because that sounds.
it's hard to find. I think they printed like 2,500 copies or something, and they all sold out pretty
Oh.
much. It's around. Like I'm sure some stores have it. Uh, yeah. So like I know I have like 400 copies in my house.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
At some point, I'll get a table at a convention or something.
Yeah. Well, you should. Yeah, definitely. You chose, or did you work with the artist for this book before?
With which book? Sorry, Bounty Hunters or
For Intrusion.
oh, yeah. We worked on an 8-page. My very first Marvel story was a tie-in to Secret Empire. They had like a anthology series tie-in
Okay.
called the Brave New World, and my very first story was this 8-page story, and he was the artist, and he's like, I want to work with you again, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we actually have my dream project. He's the artist attached to it,
Nice.
so we had to walk away from an offer, which I won't talk about, but hopefully we'll actually get it made at some point
Nice.
soon. Yeah, it's a pretty cool project. So yeah, so we've been working together for a while now. But
That's
he's
cool.
Mark Lorenzana. He's pretty good.
When you get assigned, or let's say backtrack a little bit, I guess. So when a publisher, Marvel, DC, approaches you to write a character, do they assign an artist to you, or is that something you get to? Oh, okay, so they do.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
once in a while they'll say like, hey, do you have any thoughts or recommendations? But ultimately, like the editor or editors that are assigned to the project, they're basically like, it's so underappreciated in comics how much the editors do, but basically they're everything from like an air traffic control they just make sure everything gets done, so like basically they'll the way I've been approached, especially with Star Wars stuff, is like they'll approach with hey, we want to do a series like the Halcyon Legacy
Hmm.
tied into the new theme park
Right. Right.
attraction, and like I'd done Galaxy's Edge before, so it's like basically there might be some guidelines, like we want to set it across multiple eras or something like that, and but in that case I could pitch the characters I wanted to use, so that was something that was like more came out like more of with my input. But then with Bounty Hunters, it's like we want to have a series called Star Wars Bounty Hunters, and we want it to center around Valance
Right.
and also the Empire Strikes Back Bounty Hunters. So that
Oh,
was
nice.
it evolved a lot afterwards, but like that was the original. So then you come up with a pitch, they approve or don't approve it, or like work with you on it, and then they assign an artist, then you write a script. Uh, Eventually, they edit it and send it to the artist. The artist does layouts. The artist does the
Hmm.
finished inked pages. Goes to colorist, letterer. So it's like an assembly line, and at every step, the editor is very involved. So
Cool.
yeah, for the better for the project.
Now, do you have like a bucket list of like superheroes or supervillains that you want to write for?
I mean, getting to do Star Wars is I've already achieved a lot of it. So
There
there's
you
certain Star Wars
Yeah.
characters. Uh, I would probably love to do some tales across many, maybe some other eras of
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars. Um, I did get to write Mace Windu, and I love that era of Jedi. So that was only an 8-page story, but that was kind of nice. Um, I'm with Midnight Suns. I'm writing some characters that I particularly like. That sort of magical end of the Marvel universe. Um, but the weird thing is, like, I had a list, and some of them I've gotten to do, and I don't know if you can see behind me, but every time I've written a character that I really like, I buy one of the
Nice.
Hasbro action figures, either Star
Uh-huh.
Wars or Marvel, and they go on my, like, well, it's like almost like trophies. So um, yeah, but for the most part, I've done a lot of the ones I've wanted to do. They're there are other properties outside that I would love to tackle if the stars aligned.
Hmm.
Like I don't know if you remember the cartoon Thundar the Barbarian. I would love to somehow
I think I remember that one. Yeah.
get that into comics. I grew up loving Micronauts. I don't know
Hmm.
if that would ever be something. So there's all sorts of things. But the other thing too is I found um, I'll write a character and fall in love with that character that I never knew. Like I mentioned, Electra, Silver
Hmm.
Surfer was, I love the look, but it was just not a character I felt very connected. I kind of felt like he was kind of aloof.
Yeah.
Um, and I found a way in, and I would really love to revisit that character. So, like, getting to write them, you learn more about them than, even as a reader. So my answer might change,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
as I go.
I hear you. That's cool. That's cool. So beyond geek culture, beyond comic book writing, what do you have any pursuits beyond that? What are your passions outside of your keyboard and
Well, so I still like keeping one foot in the world of journalism. I'll start there.
okay.
Uh, like right now, thanks to Axel and AWA and his new company, AWA Studios, we have a partnership with NBC News, and we're doing nonfiction comics. We did something called COVID Chronicles 2 years ago, and it was
Okay.
using the illustrated, the graphic format. Dalibor Talajic is the amazing artist, and we did like 10 stories of real life people at the sort of the
Oh
front
wow.
lines of the
Okay.
COVID fight, and now we're doing climate change and climate crisis chronicles. So like California firefighter fighting wildfires, and I would do interviews, like hours of interviews with these people, get reference photos. So I love the reporting, um, and I miss it a little bit. And so like I've
Hmm.
here and there stayed on with NBC News, like, and done some reporting, a lot of obituary work. But I love the active reporting, and like outside of work, um, I like traveling a lot. I don't know that, my daughter just went to university now. So like, uh, now that we're sort of empty nesters, maybe we'll do a little bit more than we have. Pandemic obviously got in the way a bit, but this year we went to like Iceland, Japan.
Oh wow. Nice.
Yeah, we do it like in a fairly affordable way. So, I'd love to do more of that.
Very cool. Very cool. Now you mentioned Midnight Suns. I was going to
Yes.
bring this up, but so let's let's talk about that a little bit. I first read Midnight Suns, I think when not too long ago with Doctor Strange,
Mm.
and I think Blade was in there, and I think even
Ghost
Morbius.
Rider.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was interesting. But what really caught my eye was that I had heard through different channels that they were going to be making a video game
Mm.
of it. So I'm a big video game person. I like playing a lot of video games, and when I saw that, I was like really excited. And then I saw that you were doing a Midnight Suns run. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you. So, like, for starters, Midnight Suns was back in the day when it was for the first version of it was Midnight Suns SONS, and that was like
Yes.
like
Hmm.
a set lineup, or gender specific like set lineup. And so this is spelled Midnight Suns SUNS, which is twofold. It's like a more diverse lineup, and it's also a play on, Midnight Suns, like within darkness, this sort of light within the darkness. And so I like the title, like on that front. The lineup is influenced by the video game, but not directly tied in. So this is not an adaptation. It's not a prequel, anything like that. The lineup is Spirit Rider, Magic, Sister Grimm from the Runaways, Wolverine, and Blade. So Blade is like the one. We have a Ghost Rider. It's just different Ghost Rider, and Blade is like the one returning member. Now, part of that also has to do with like this is set in the Marvel universe. This is not, an alternate reality. Well, I won't dabble too much into specifics about the plot, but it has repercussions on the Marvel. It's tied into the Marvel universe. It has repercussions, going forward. So like Doctor Strange is not around right now, so Doctor Strange was not going to be part of this team. Ghost Rider, both Robbie Reyes and Johnny Blaze, like they're doing things right now elsewhere, and so that also influenced the lineup. We didn't want this to seem like, oh, this happened 6 months ago, or maybe this happened a year from now. It's not really directly tied in. So we wanted it to feel like it was happening now in the Marvel universe, and that meant, Doctor Strange could not be a part of this.
Right.
So yeah, in terms of like the plot, all I'll say is it's there's like an unofficial sixth member, and that's Zoe Laveau from Strange Academy.
Oh, nice.
And she's less a member and more sort of at the center of the plot. And that is that there is this sudden apocalyptic vision that every magic user in the world experiences at the same time. And it's something that looks like it's going to happen in a few days, and Laveau is at the center of it. Okay. And so that's basically kicks. And then also this weird team, which includes Wolverine, who is not a magic user, is seen in this image, in this vision as well. And that sort of kickstarts the series of events that are at the heart of the book. Some people are out to, take out this little girl this teen girl because they're like, she poses a threat, and other people are out to help. And so it starts a series of events that basically are the are basically the plot of the 5 issues.
Sounds amazing. I mean, it really does. I mean, I read through Avengers versus X-Men recently, and I love that, the whole, fighting over basically the fate of someone, right? So I'm looking forward to Midnight Suns then completely. I mean, Wolverine is one of my favorite characters, so I'm glad he's there. Blade is also another one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, I loved writing Blade. Also, it was like, because this is my first real chance to sort of explore that corner of the Marvel universe. I got to go a little wacky with some of the like the plot twists and like where we go from the first issue on, and so that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. I just handed in the 4th out of 5 scripts. So
very cool. Very cool. Well, I think the first one comes out in the middle of September. Yep. So everyone out there, make sure you go put your orders in now, because I'm sure it's going to be very popular, especially when the video game does get released eventually, I think in the middle of October now. And you'll probably be in your 2nd issue by then. And it's just going to blow up, I think. It's just going to be huge.
I hope so. I'm having fun writing it. And like, basically, if the miniseries does well, there probably will be a sequel. So, fingers crossed.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm going to do a quick lightning round before I let you go of just quick questions. So it's going to be pop culture, just going to get some of your favorites. So do you have a favorite movie?
My favorite all-time movie is Les Diaboliques, which is a French movie from, I think it's like 1954. It's a suspense movie. Okay. Definitely worth checking out. That's all I'll say.
I will look into that. That's interesting. Favorite TV show?
Ooh, it depends when you ask me. It's either The Wire or Breaking Bad.
Okay.
Like recently I've loved like the Star Wars stuff, certainly like Mandalorian and the Rebels cartoon. But if I had to pick one, it's going to be 2, and it's Breaking Bad and The Wire.
Well, that's because Andor hasn't been released yet, right?
Yes, exactly. Ask me again.
Now this can be a little hard. So favorite book?
Favorite book? That is a hard one because okay, so if I had to pick one, it's actually a nonfiction book called The Devil's Candy.
Okay.
I did a lot of coverage of film journalism, and it is on the set of Bonfire of the Vanities, this like really star-crossed
Interesting, right?
but it's so well written. Definitely, Julie Salomon is the writer. Definitely worth your time reading The Devil's Candy.
Interesting. I will have to look into that as well. Favorite music album?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm a big Tool fan.
Okay.
So even though it's not my favorite Tool album, but I'm going to say Opiate, which was their first EP. And I'm just saying that because the reason I got that album was when I went to university at McGill University in Montreal, when you would donate blood, they had all these weird like promotional things going on. And so like there was a trivia contest. And the question was, what is Archie Bunker's favorite baseball team? And I knew he lived in Queens on All in the Family. So I said the Mets. And so they brought a shoebox full of cassettes. This is in 1993.
Okay.
And then I saw the Opiate cover with this reptilian priest, and I was like, "That's metal. I will get it." And that album changed my life because I'm still listening to the band. So
very cool, very cool. Yeah, cassettes. Yeah, remember those?
Yes,
I remember getting.
That's how long ago it was.
We went through a radio station was having a promotion at like a mall near where I lived, and the prize we got was like a double cassette of Depeche Mode. So I like listened to that over and over again. So I was a huge Depeche Mode fan after that. But favorite comic book?
Ooh, that's a little harder. I love God Loves Man Kills, the X-Men graphic novel. I think, if I had like a one single issue / that would be that. Watchmen is high up on my list. Oh, that was such a important one, back in the day. And then, yeah, I'll pick depending on whether you want like a single issue or I also loved Alien Legion as well. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Now,
not answering one, you notice I'm being very like
vague on it. It's fine. I get it. I understand. It is hard. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to pick right now. I could. Okay. Favorite comic book character. Could you do that?
Okay. Growing up, first it was the Flash, then it was Captain America for a while. I love Blade a lot now, just the whole vampire and but I think like right now selfishly there's a character I created for bounty hunters called Tonga, and I love her story and sort of where it's going and things like
Very
that.
Cool.
Also she's my baby, so yeah, so again I've answered 4 different people. I suck at this.
No, that's perfectly fine. But it does bring up a good question, though. Do you have a deeper connection to your baby, your creations that you either write, that you create, or that you've written for? Whether
I mean, I think I definitely feel a connection to some of them. And a lot of it, like it's so collaborative with the artist. So in the case of like Tonga, Paolo, the artist on Bounty Hunters, it's our creation together, and so there's some thought that goes into it together. So that is special. I mean, but also I feel that same way, like when I'm writing Hawkeye or Valance or characters that I writing over a long period of time.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. So if any of our viewers wanted to interact with you, where could they find you on like social media?
I mean, I'm on Twitter. My handle is at Ethan J. Sachs. Because there is a younger, better looking, more successful Ethan Sachs, who I actually know in Washington, who got the actual.
He took it from you.
Took it first, yeah. So,
very cool.
I'll be sure they can find me there. That's probably the best way.
Okay, I'll be sure to share that out. Any other projects that you want to promote real quick before we sign off?
I mean, there's something that may or may not be announced in the not too distant future that I'm finishing up now. It's kind of a period graphic novel for a smaller publisher. I have a bunch, like I said, I have a bunch of creator-owned projects that are very early on, and hopefully they come out in the not-too-distant future. And then, Bounty Hunters is ongoing, so we'll see what else the future brings.
Well, thank you again, Ethan. We really appreciate that. So everyone out there, make sure you go follow Ethan J. Sachs on Twitter, purchase Bounty Hunters, look out for Midnight Suns, and we thank you again for spending some time with us today.
Thank you for having me.